The Verdant Plaza Mall had been the talk of the town for months. Billboards plastered every major street, boasting slogans like, "The future of shopping awaits you," and "Explore infinite possibilities." It promised cutting-edge design, luxury stores, and the most advanced escalator system in the world. A network so seamless, you'd feel like you were flying. The grand opening fell on Black Friday, and my roommate Amanda insisted we check it out. "It's not just a mall," she gushed as we drove to the edge of town where the massive structure loomed like a steel fortress. "It's an experience. We have to go." I wasn't convinced. I'd never been a fan of malls, especially on Black Friday, when people turned into rabid animals over discounted toasters. But Amanda's enthusiasm wore me down. "This better be worth it," I muttered, parking the car. The exterior of Verdant Plaza was sleek and futuristic, its glass walls reflecting the overcast sky. A constant stream of shoppers flowed into the main entrance, their excitement palpable. The moment we stepped inside, my unease began. The interior was massive, far larger than it looked from the outside. Floors stretched endlessly in every direction, and the ceiling soared so high it disappeared into mist. Everywhere we looked, glowing escalators crisscrossed the space like arteries, their soft hum blending with the low chatter of the crowd. "It's incredible," Amanda breathed, spinning in a slow circle. I nodded, though my stomach twisted. Something about the mall felt wrong. The air was too still, the lights too bright. And those escalators, they seemed to go on forever, disappearing into distant clouds. "Let's check out the upper floors," Amanda said, tugging my arm. I hesitated. "Why not stick to the ground level?" She rolled her eyes. "Come on, Kevin. The whole point of this place is the escalators." We joined the throng of shoppers on the nearest escalator, a sleek silver contraption that glided upward with unnatural smoothness. The ascent was fast, faster than any escalator I'd ever been on, and the ground floor shrank below us as we climbed higher and higher. By the time we stepped off, the air felt colder. The stores on this floor were luxurious, their windows filled with dazzling displays of designer clothes and sparkling jewelry. But something about them felt off. "Is it me, or are the mannequins weird?" Amanda asked, peering into a storefront. I followed her gaze. The mannequins were eerily lifelike, their plastic faces frozen in expressions of fear. One seemed to be screaming, its mouth open in a silent wail. "Let's keep moving," I said, my unease growing. We wandered through the floor, passing stores that grew stranger with each step. Shelves were stocked with items that didn't make sense, shoes with soles that oozed liquid, clocks with hands that spun backward, and food that seemed to breathe. "I think we're in the weird section," Amanda joked, but her voice wavered. I checked my watch and frowned. It was still 2:15, the same time it had been when we arrived on this floor. "I think my watch is broken," I said, showing Amanda. She glanced at her phone and blanched. "It's not just your watch. My phone isn't working either." We decided to head back to the ground floor, but when we returned to the escalator, it wasn't there. In its place were 3 new escalators, each leading to a different level. "I don't remember these," Amanda said, her voice trembling. "Me either." We chose the middle escalator, hoping it would take us back down. But as we descended, the stores around us shifted. The lights dimmed, and the air grew colder. When we stepped off, the mall was unrecognizable. This floor was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by flickering neon signs. The stores were empty, their shelves bare, and the mannequins were gone. The escalator we just stepped off vanished, leaving us stranded. "Kevin, I don't like this," Amanda whispered. "Me neither." As we turned to explore, we heard it, a faint hum, growing louder. From the shadows emerged a figure, a man dressed in a crisp red vest with a name tag that read Greeter. "Welcome, shoppers," he said, his voice smooth and metallic. Thanks," I said, stepping back. His smile widened, revealing sharp, unnaturally white teeth. "You've reached the exclusive level of Verdant Plaza, where your desires come true. We just want to leave," Amanda said. The greeter tilted his head. Leave? But the shopping has just begun. Behind him, the shelves began to fill, items appearing out of thin air. But these weren't ordinary products. A row of shoes twitched like they were alive. A coat on a hanger pulsed like it had a heartbeat. Take your pick, the greeter said. But choose wisely. Everything comes with a price. We're not buying anything, I said, grabbing Amanda's hand and pulling her away. Leaving isn't an option, the greeter said, his voice echoing. Not until you play. The escalators reappeared ahead of us, for this time, each glowing faintly. Choose, the greeter said. One will take you where you wish to go. The others, he grinned. Well, let's just say they're less pleasant. I hesitated, my mind racing. Kevin, Amanda whispered. We can't just stand here. Reluctantly, I pointed to the second escalator. That one. We stepped on, the greeter's laughter echoing behind us. The ride was slow, the hum of the escalator growing louder with each step. The stores around us flickered like static, their displays shifting between normal and horrifying. We passed a food court where the meals moved on their own, burgers crawling across the tables. A clothing store displayed dresses that bled. When we reached the top, Amanda screamed. The floor was covered in faces, human faces pressed into the tiles, their mouths open in silent screams. Their eyes followed us as we moved, and faint whispers filled the air. Help us, they begged. Don't let it take you. Amanda grabbed my arm, tears streaming down her face. We have to get out of here. We ran toward the nearest escalator, but as we stepped on, the steps began to melt beneath our feet. Desperate, we jumped onto another escalator, this one glowing a faint green. The air around us grew heavier, and the whispers grew louder. Turn back, they warned. It's watching. We reached a floor filled with mirrors, each reflecting twisted versions of ourselves. In one, I was older, my face lined with despair. In another, Amanda was missing, her place taken by a mannequin. This isn't real, Amanda whispered. The mirrors shattered, and the greeter appeared again, his grin wider than ever. Only one way out, he said, gesturing to a final escalator. But beware, once chosen, it cannot be undone. We ran for the escalator, the greeter's laughter echoing behind us. The ride was agonizingly slow, the air thick with dread. When we reached the top, we found ourselves back at the entrance of the mall. Relief washed over me, until I looked at the glass walls. Our reflections were gone. Instead, the faces of the trapped stared back at us, their hollow eyes filled with despair. And in the distance, the escalators hummed, waiting for their next victims. Black Friday is always chaos. It's the one day of the year when ordinary people become animals, clawing and trampling each other for flat-screen TVs and discounted smartphones. I never understood the appeal, but this year, I had no choice. My sister Mia had been saving up for months to buy a gaming laptop. She couldn't afford it otherwise, and when the mall announced an exclusive Black Friday sale with unbeatable prices, she begged me to come with her. Just an hour, she'd promised. We'll be in and out before the real madness starts. We arrived at the Harbinger Galleria Mall at midnight. The place was packed, a sea of people pushing through the double doors. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and a dull roar of chatter filled the air as we made our way inside. The sales were insane, 50%, 70%, even 90% off in some stores. Shoppers darted between racks, their arms overflowing with merchandise. This is nuts, I muttered, sidestepping a woman who was arguing with a clerk over a toaster. Mia ignored me, her eyes locked on the electronics store. The crowd inside Tech Haven was suffocating. People shoved and shouted, fighting over display models like their lives depended on it. Mia spotted the laptop she wanted, a sleek black model with glowing blue keys, and lunged for it. Got it! She yelled, clutching the box like it was a lifeline. I breathed a sigh of relief. Great! Let's check out and get out of here. But as we turned toward the register, a voice crackled over the mall's pay system. Attention, shoppers! The doors are now locked. The sale of the century has begun. The lights dimmed, and a strange silence fell over the mall. The crowd froze, their murmurs replaced by uneasy glances. Is this part of the event? Mia whispered. I shook my head, my stomach twisting. A soft hum filled the air, growing louder until it was almost deafening. The PA crackled again. Each item you purchase tonight will fulfill your greatest desires. But be warned, all sales are final. The crowd broke into nervous laughter, unsure if it was a joke or a gimmick. Then the lights flickered, and the first scream rang out. A man near the front of the store had fallen to the ground, clutching his leg. His new pair of sneakers had fused to his feet, the soles glowing with a strange blue light. Help me! He screamed, thrashing as the shoes dragged him forward. His legs moved in a jerky, unnatural rhythm, pulling him out of the store and into the mall. We stood frozen, too stunned to move. Did you see that? Mia whispered, her voice trembling. Before I could answer, another scream echoed from the clothing store across the hall. A woman stumbled out of the store, her arms wrapped in a shimmering jacket that looked alive. The fabric pulsed and writhed, tightening around her body like a second skin. It's eating me! She shrieked, clawing at the jacket. Blood seeped from beneath the fabric, and within seconds she collapsed in a heap. Panic erupted. People ran in every direction, clutching their purchases. We need to leave, I said, grabbing Mia's arm. The doors are locked, she said, her face pale. Then we'll find another way out. As we ran through the mall, the chaos escalated. A man in the food court screamed as his new blender whirred to life, the blades shattering the glass and spraying shards across his face. A child's toy, a stuffed bear, twisted its head 180 degrees, its button eyes glowing red as it snarled at its owner. The mall felt alive, its air thick with static and something metallic. The escalators churned endlessly, their steps creaking as if straining under the weight of something unseen. We ducked into a store to catch our breath. The shelves were empty, the air cold and still. What's happening? Mia whispered, clutching the laptop. I don't know, I said, my voice shaking. But it's not normal. The PA crackled again. Shoppers, remember, the only way to leave is to return your purchases. But returning comes with a price. What does that mean? Mia asked, her voice rising in panic. I didn't have an answer. We crept back into the mall, sticking to the shadows. The once crowded halls were eerily empty, littered with abandoned shopping bags and broken merchandise. Then we saw him. The man was tall and thin, dressed in a sharp suit with a blood-red tie. His face was pale and expressionless, his eyes black voids that seemed to swallow the light. He stood in the center of the atrium, a clipboard in his hand. Can I help you? He asked, his voice smooth and cold. We just want to leave, I said, stepping in front of Mia. He smiled faintly. Then return your purchase. Mia hesitated, clutching the laptop. What's the catch? Everything comes with a price, the man said. Return what you've taken, and you'll be free to go. But you must sacrifice something of equal value. What kind of sacrifice? I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he gestured toward a small kiosk in the corner of the atrium. The sign above it read, Returns Department. We approached cautiously, the man watching us with unblinking eyes. The kiosk was manned by a figure that looked human at first glance, but its movements were jerky and unnatural, like a puppet on invisible strings. Its hollow eyes glowed faintly as it smiled at us. Returning an item? It asked, its voice a distorted whisper. Mia placed the laptop on the counter. The figure tilted its head, its smile widening. Your price will be memory. What does that mean? Mia asked. Before I could stop her, the figure reached out and touched her forehead. Mia gasped, her eyes rolling back as the figure murmured something inaudible. When it pulled away, she collapsed into my arms, trembling. What did you do to her? I shouted. The figure smiled. The price has been paid. Mia blinked up at me, her face pale. Kevin? She said, her voice uncertain. It's me, I said. Are you okay? She frowned, her eyes filling with confusion. Who's Kevin? My heart sank. The figure had taken her memory of me. I turned to the man in the suit, anger boiling in my chest. You're a monster. He smiled faintly. You chose to shop. The terms were clear. Before I could respond, the lights flickered, and the PA crackled again. Attention, shoppers. The sale will end in 10 minutes. Any remaining items will become permanent inventory. The man turned to leave, his footsteps echoing through the atrium. Good luck, he said. I helped Mia to her feet, my mind racing. We had to warn the others, if there were any left. As we ran through the mall, the air grew heavier, the lights dimming further. The stores seemed to close in around us, their displays twisting into grotesque parodies of what they once were. A mannequin in a department store window turned its head as we passed, its eyes following us. Help us, it whispered. We finally reached the main entrance, where a crowd of shoppers had gathered. The glass doors were fogged with condensation, their locks glowing faintly. A woman pounded on the glass, screaming for help. It's no use, I said. The doors won't open. What do we do? Someone asked, their voice trembling. The PA crackled one final time. Return your items, or join the inventory. One by one, the shoppers approached the returns department, each paying a terrible price. A man lost his sight, a woman her voice, another shopper aged decades in seconds. When it was my turn, I placed my phone on the counter. The figure smiled, its glowing eyes boring into mine. Your price will be time. It reached out, and a wave of cold washed over me. When I stepped away, I felt lighter, emptier. My reflection in a nearby mirror showed the truth. Streaks of gray now ran through my hair, and deep lines creased my face. But the doors unlocked, and the mall released us. As Mia and I stumbled into the cold night air, I glanced back. The man in the suit stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. See you next year, he said. I don't shop on Black Friday anymore. But every year, when the clock strikes midnight, I hear it, the faint hum of the mall's PA system, whispering promises of deals too good to be true. I never thought I'd end up working the night shift at a place like Crescent Hollow Mall. The place had been abandoned for over a decade, the once bustling shopping center now little more than a decaying relic of the past. But after months of job hunting and mounting bills, the paycheck they offered was too good to pass up. Just keep an eye on the place, my supervisor, Jerry, had said during the interview. People break in sometimes, kids mostly. We just need someone to make sure no one gets hurt, or worse, sets the place on fire. It sounded easy enough. And honestly, I figured I'd just catch up on sleep in the security office and collect my paycheck. That was before my first night. The mall was enormous. Even in its heyday, it must have been a labyrinth of storefronts and long, winding hallways. Now, it was silent and desolate, the air heavy with the smell of mildew and dust. My footsteps echoed as I made my way through the main concourse, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the shadows. I tried to ignore the unsettling feeling that the place was watching me. The security office was tucked in the corner of the first floor, its walls lined with old monitors that displayed grainy feeds from the mall's outdated cameras. The screens flickered occasionally, the images distorted with static, but they seemed to work well enough. My first patrol was uneventful. The stores were dark and empty, their displays covered in dust and cobwebs. Mannequins stood frozen in various poses, their blank faces reflecting the faint glow of my flashlight. A few of them had fallen over, their limbs twisted at odd angles. I told myself the unease I felt was just my imagination, that I was letting the isolation get to me. After all, this was just an old building. Nothing more. Around midnight, the first strange thing happened. I was in the food court, checking the emergency exits, when I heard it, faint footsteps echoing through the mall. They were distant at first, barely audible, but they grew louder, more deliberate. Hello? I called out, my voice bouncing off the empty walls. Anyone there? No answer. I shone my flashlight down the hallway, but it revealed nothing but empty storefronts. The mannequins in the nearest window seemed to lean forward slightly, their blank faces tilted in my direction. I told myself it was just the angle of the light, and continued my patrol. The second strange thing happened an hour later. I was back in the security office, watching the monitors, when one of the feeds flickered and went black. A moment later, it came back on, but the image was wrong. The camera was pointed at the main concourse, where I'd just been a few minutes earlier. But the layout was different. The stores were rearranged, their signs unfamiliar. A store that had been boarded up earlier was now brightly lit, its shelves stocked with pristine merchandise. And standing in the middle of the hallway was a mannequin. It hadn't been there before. I left the office to investigate, my flashlight trembling slightly in my hand. When I reached the main concourse, the layout was exactly as it had been earlier, boarded up stores, dusty floors, no sign of the mannequin. But when I turned to head back, I froze. The mannequin was standing at the end of the hallway, facing me. I took a step back, my heart pounding. The mannequin didn't move, but its presence was oppressive, its faceless head tilted slightly, as if it were watching me. "Who's doing this?" I demanded, my voice echoing in the empty space. Silence. I turned and ran back to the security office, slamming the door behind me. My breathing was ragged as I stared at the monitors, hoping to catch whoever was messing with me. But the cameras showed nothing. Just empty hallways. By 2 a.m. the whispers started. At first, I thought it was the wind, faint, distant sounds that could easily be explained away. But as the hours dragged on, the whispers grew louder, more distinct. They seemed to come from all around me, echoing through the halls, murmuring words I couldn't quite understand. I left the office again, determined to figure out what was going on. The layout of the mall had changed. The corridors twisted and turned in ways they hadn't before, leading me to areas I didn't recognize. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. The mannequins were everywhere now, lining the walls and windows, their plastic faces turned toward me. Some of them were missing limbs, their bodies cracked and broken. Others were pristine, their expressions eerily lifelike. In one of the storefronts, I saw movement, a flicker of shadow that sent a chill down my spine. I stepped closer, my flashlight sweeping the room, and froze. A face was staring at me from the wall. It wasn't a mannequin. It was human, the features twisted in agony, the skin pale and cracked like old plaster. Its eyes moved, locking onto mine. "Help me!" it whispered, the voice barely audible. I stumbled back, my heart racing, and turned to run. The hallways were shifting again, the walls closing in around me. The mannequins seemed to multiply, their bodies crowding the space, their heads turning to follow my every move. When I finally made it back to the office, I slammed the door shut and locked it. The monitors flickered, showing distorted images of hallways that no longer existed, their floors littered with broken mannequins and decayed debris. And then, on one of the screens, I saw myself. I was standing in the main concourse, flashlight in hand, my face pale and drawn. But it wasn't me. I was in the office, watching. The figure on the screen turned slowly, its eyes hollow and glowing faintly. It smiled, its teeth jagged and black, and raised a hand to wave at the camera. The screen went dark. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with a cacophony of voices. The walls seemed to breathe, the plaster shifting and bulging as faces began to emerge, dozens of them, their mouths open in silent screams. I realized then what the mall wanted. The faces on the walls weren't just trapped souls, they were the previous guards. Jerry had lied. This wasn't a job, it was a death sentence. Desperate, I searched the office for anything that could help me. My flashlight flickered and died, leaving me in near total darkness. The only light came from the monitors, which now displayed a single message. "Offer an employee, and you may leave." I understood. The mall wanted someone new. A replacement. I ran through the shifting corridors, the walls pressing closer with every step. The mannequins moved now, their arms reaching for me, their whispers growing louder. When I reached the entrance, I saw Jerry waiting. "You knew," I said, my voice shaking. He smiled sadly. "It's the only way. Someone has to stay." The mannequins closed in, their plastic hands cold and unyielding. The faces on the walls watched silently, their eyes filled with despair. Jerry stepped back into the shadows, his expression unreadable. "Good luck," he said, his voice echoing as the doors slammed shut behind him. I was alone. The mall had me now. And on the walls, a new face began to form,